Hello and welcome to our fourth webinar. And today I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Imad Nassoura, who is the secondary head of ICS-Paris. Welcome, Imad, and thank you very much for giving up your time today to
Thank you very
share with
much.
us your talk. This is a talk I believe you gave in Amman in Jordan to the IB conference
Yes.
as a speaker. Would you just like to share a little bit more about that setting and what you were doing?
Sure. Just a little bit of background on myself. Prior to ICS Paris, I served as the secondary principal in Qatar Foundation. And as part of my job there, not just within the school, I've established the Qatar IB Association of the country. So I was the founding chairperson of the Qatar IB Association that facilitates collaboration among IB schools in Qatar. Throughout my journey as well, I've acquired my academic credentials. I got my doctoral degree in leadership and innovation from New York University, a master's degree from the State University of New York, and an executive degree from ICS-Paris in Qatar. So just a quick background. This happened sometime in January, February. I was invited to the IB Day, and it's usually a celebration that brings together all educators of IB schools in the country to listen to developments in education, presentations, and sharing of best practice. And at the time, I was invited there to speak about AI in education and how AI can integrate into IB education. So it was more catering towards IB schools and IB educators in general. But then again, these are common practices in education and innovative practices in education that could apply to any setting or any program, I would say. So just to start us off, to go through what I went through with the IB day, I started off with the IB mission, and usually as a secondary school principal or principals or leaders, the rollout of artificial intelligence is not just a technological upgrade. It is a profound cultural transformation. Edgar Schein's organizational culture model, with its three layers being artifacts, espoused values, and underlying assumptions, offer a powerful lens to guide this journey and ensure AI aligns with our educational mission, particularly in an IB context. And that's why I wanted to start with an IB mission. So then when we look at the IB mission, I highlighted a few words here that could need revision or we need to rethink them as IB educators in schools. Being knowledgeable, meaning that in the past, knowledgeable meant you had to acquire facts, you had to recite these facts, and that's how our students learned knowledge. However, in the age of AI, this knowledge is being generated by artificial intelligence. It's actually gathering knowledge from different places. So our understanding of knowledgeable should shift in this case. The other part is rigorous assessment, and I think this is an area that our educators are struggling with when it comes to how do we develop rigorous assessment in the age of AI? Can I maintain integrity of an assessment or the academic integrity in the age of AI? And this is where this presentation, I think, will focus as we move forward. And then the final part of the mission that we have here being active and lifelong. Active learners are learners who are taking the reins of their learning process. They are applying their skills to find information, to sift through information. So in this case, when we say our learners are active in the age of AI, what does it mean to be active? Can I just send a prompt to AI and say, okay, this is me being active, and AI is going to generate this response, and I'm going to submit it? From the teacher's perspective, how do I promote active learning in the age of AI? Does this mean that I have to shift the paradigm, think differently of how I'm giving the tasks, how I'm asking students to submit work? And these are all things that I'm putting out there for people to think about. How can we shift that paradigm? I don't have the answers for them, but it is worth putting out to communities, to staff, and I understand that schools have different contexts, and it's important to respect these contexts and how each school is going to decide what active learners look like in their specific context. Eventually prompting lifelong learning, which is an emphasis on skill development over content regurgitation, basically. So I'm going to put out there a question that I get asked all the time in different contexts of schools. How can we ensure academic integrity in the age of AI? So this is the core of the challenge that I feel schools face when it comes to artificial intelligence. And that will take me to the three pillars that I shared during my talk. And so, in order to create a cohesive system for academic integrity, school leaders need to make sure that there are three pillars that support that cohesive system. They need to develop a shared language. They need to create artifacts of learning to demonstrate the learning journey of students, and they need to emphasize the student responsibility in the learning process. And we are going to delve into the different areas and the different pillars that are going to create this cohesive system. So this also reiterates the idea that it is not just a technological upgrade when we're speaking about AI. It's not just replacing paper and pencil with a Word document. This is a culture shift. This is an ideology shift, not just among students, but among our staff, who I would also reiterate to say that our teachers have been taught, and even myself, have been taught in an age where AI did not exist, where these advancements were not in place. We learned the traditional way. And so there is a need to focus among school leaders on the frame shift or the culture shift of our educators before we move forward to developing something for our students. So to start us off with the first aspect, I wanted to share something that I've created with a school that I worked with. And this is a school-developed protocol to have a shared language. So generally speaking, before we delve into the assignments, the assessments, everything that we need to do with our students, we need to come into an agreement on what are the rules and regulations for using AI? What language are we using as a school community among educators and among students when it comes to AI? And something that I came across, or something that I've developed and felt that is necessary, is to create a language framework for our students. AI doesn't mean that our students are going to use AI in every single task. It means that we need to augment the learning process with AI. Some tasks, we have to say you are not supposed to use any AI tools in that task because, and to explain it to the students, these are the areas or the competencies that we need to develop in your learning. And for us to develop these areas, in preparation for you to use AI, we cannot use AI at this step. And here I called it the foundation path, where educators clearly iterate that the task at hand should not use any artificial intelligence. It should not use any artificial support when it comes to the task that they are doing. So it's traditional research methods. It is they focus on the understanding of the fundamentals in this path, and not the integration of technology. The second path that I wanted to describe in this case is the exploration path. And here you use AI to assist in the learning process rather than the final outcome. So we teach students that AI could act as a sounding board. You have to make sure that anytime you try to use AI, you are transparent about it. You make sure you document it, you put it down. And it's usually a starting point. It helps you bounce your ideas around before you develop the actual assignment or task. Leading to the final path, which is the innovation path. And here we are asking for a full integration of AI tools. But when I say integration of AI tools in this case, there are plenty of tools around us, and each is specialized in a certain area. So it is important for our students in this case to use the appropriate AI tool for the task at hand. So if they're generating images, they're using AI tools to generate those images. If they are trying to create, charts, there are specific AI tools for that. But it also is important for students to understand the limitations of the AI tools that they are using and the importance of having their input and their judgment integrated into the assignment at hand. So I just went through the shared language protocol that we've developed. But then again, this is one of many examples that schools can use to develop a shared understanding of how we want to teach our students appropriate use of AI. It is important to highlight, though, that these create an agreed vocabulary set that teachers can use with students. It is important for students to see their teachers in agreement, using common language and holding them to the same standard across the board, which makes it important for school leaders to establish those agreed vocabulary, to establish those routines that we want to use. Eventually, community involvement is also very important. So not just students understanding those vocabulary and teachers, but our parent community and wider stakeholders understanding that this is our approach to using artificial intelligence, our approach to actually developing the common language. Of course, it's easy for me to say that I'm going to develop all these things. But I think intentional rollout and strategy when introducing these things is important. I've had this conversation with one of my colleagues. It is much easier to provide bite-sized, small projects to our teachers to digest, to reflect, to implement before we take on the full project or take on the full overwhelming reality of AI around us. So breaking it down into pieces is the role of our school leaders, is the role of our program coordinators to make sure it's accessible for our teaching community on top of everything that they are doing with the teaching, with assessments across the different programs. So when I move from the shared language, I want to go to the artifacts of learning. So one aspect that we discussed previously here is the shared language at this point. I wanted to move us to the artifacts of learning next. And artifacts of learning, in many of the programs that we see, the students are assessed on a final product or an outcome. There are some programs, including the IB program, that put emphasis on the process of learning, not just the outcome or the final product of the learning process. However, in the age of AI, it is a lot more important to place that emphasis on the learning process. So usually your final product represents your knowledge, your skills, what you've been doing. It's a culmination of the learning process that you have, and it is still important. However, then we have to create a certain pathway for students to show how they reached their final product. What are some of the challenges that they faced? How did they use their skills to address these challenges and overcome these challenges to reach that final outcome? This also serves as a portfolio. So it's a student record of what they've been doing. It validates the originality of the work. We no longer have to question whether this was produced by a student or not, because I can go through the thought process and the journey the student took from the initiation of the project until I reach the outcome of the project. So this is another layer that creates kind of accountability on the student's part of the learning process and of proving authenticity and originality of their work at the end of an assignment or a task. And so with artifacts, it becomes the verification of that authenticity becomes a lot easier because I have the evidence of the process and I have evidence of the product, so I can easily see that. Without artifacts, we run into difficulty with authenticity because, and I'm sure that many school leaders have heard that, where teachers come to their principals or to their program coordinators say, I am sure this is not my student's work, but then I cannot prove it. I cannot provide the evidence for it because there is no learning journey before. I gave the assignment, the student submitted the assignment, the teacher, and I'm not questioning the teacher at this point, but because the teacher knows the ability of the student and has seen them under examination conditions. However, it becomes much more difficult without having concrete evidence to accuse students of academic misconduct. And so by doing this, we are actually creating a paradigm shift with student responsibility. So in pre-AI, I would say students usually submit their work, teacher checks and grades, work submitted. In the age of AI, we have students submitting their work, but they're also the burden of providing the evidence of the process in order to authenticate the work, and that can be then authenticated by the teacher. So the students, the responsibility falls on the student to make sure that they are providing evidence of every step of the way that led to the submission of their outcome. And the teacher in that model is authenticating that work by following that process and making sure that everything actually makes sense and is coherent leading up to the submission of the final product. And so by doing this, we are creating actually more student agency over their learning. As we are saying, you can use AI, you can use any tool you need to enhance your learning, but you need to show me the journey of learning that you went through. You need to show me what challenges you faced, how you've used AI to solve these challenges, what you've learned throughout the process before you submitted the final outcome. And that's what I wanted to emphasize with our teachers and with our communities. This reminds me a lot of the calculator fight. When calculator came through and you started giving them to middle schoolers, everyone, thought that this is going to destroy mathematical knowledge, it's going to hinder progress. And here we are years later, we have more engineers, we have more development in those fields than ever before. And so this teaches us a lesson to not, repeat history when it comes to AI. We need to trust that these are tools that are going to help us progress and not hinder progress or hinder the thought process. On the contrary, I think eventually it gives the students more space to critically think and remove some of the tasks that are lower level thinking tasks. It allows us to focus on the critical thinking aspect of things.
And Imad, just to insert there, the way of assessing mathematics students changed as a result, didn't it? And they brought in the calculator paper. So
Yes.
that backs up exactly your point.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, definitely. And surely even the methodology, you're right. I mean, the methodology of teaching mathematics changed. It's more contextual, it's more problem-based rather than, abstract as we're used to. It's less of an abstract process and more emphasis on, relationship to real life applications and, how students are using their mathematical knowledge to resolve real life problems. And of course, the assessment part that you mentioned, bringing in the calculator into a calculator-based assessment is also something that is now introduced. So similar to that, the AI introduction of AI could eventually lead to that, where students have access to electronic assessments aided by AI. But this means that we as educators and the education field have to rethink how we assess, rethink the way we question our students. It cannot be something that is you can put into a chat GPT or any AI platform and it generates the answer that is completely correct and is able to synthesize that answer. So I think these are some of the things that we want to keep in mind, that we want to think about, especially when we're creating a shift like this. It's important to also bring up that this is a very rapid change. We live in an era where, every day there's something new coming up. And in education, we're not used to this huge rapid change over time because it takes time for us to build our systems to it's a massive enterprise. Like all schools are fighting to catch up to what AI is asking us to do. But eventually we are dealing with human resources, with teachers who need the time to absorb, to digest, to critically analyze, and then buy in and implement. So these are all things that require time and cannot be accelerated. So there is a part of this process that needs us to take a step back and decide the pace that is that's comfortable for our schools and educators to move through. And that's something that I keep in the back of my mind as I speak about all these different things that I'm going through. So what happens in the absence of some of these artifacts or the student responsibility or the shared languages? And here we come to this. So in the absence of student responsibility, if I'm not holding students accountable to their learning, I'm asking for artifacts of learning, I'm asking for a shared language, but without responsibility, I will have some frustration among students. Without the artifacts of learning, I have uncertainty. As I've mentioned before, we always say that, okay, this is not the student's work, but I have nothing to prove that this is not the student's work. I have no learning journey. I have no portfolio. I have nothing to show that this is not the student's work. It's just my professional judgment as an educator, which is valid, but without the right evidence, academic misconduct is a huge accusation. And in cases in the IB, it would cause you to not sit for your exams and even revoke your IB diploma. So it's a serious accusation without grounds or evidence. And so without these artifacts, the teachers become uncertain, the leaders become uncertain to implement some of those academic integrity or hold students to accountable to academic misconduct. And then without a shared language, we have confusion. We have unclear expectations. So, and I've heard this before, and we've seen it with a lot of our students. A student says, yeah, I used AI, but nobody told me I shouldn't. Nobody told me that I should not use it, or nobody guided me to what extent should I be using AI for that task. And that's where the importance of having shared language developed among our school communities in order for students to be clear, teachers to be clear. And then once that clarity is in place, students can be held accountable to say, no, on the contrary, we said this is the foundation path, no AI should be used. So we start teaching and putting structures in place to enhance clarity of tasks and assignments for our students, our teachers, and our leaders. So that's kind of the three pillars. These are kind of the three pillars that I wanted to share when we're developing a cohesive academic integrity program. This takes me to something else. So if I want to move us just forward to another area that I feel that is necessary is the journey of expertise. So when we're thinking about the introduction of AI to our teachers or to our students, we need to respect and appreciate that there is a journey that both educators and students have to take in order to achieve knowledge and applicability of AI within the classroom or within the learning. And this follows the journey to expertise, which is something that we use, and I'll give an example of that in our classes. And then how can we transfer that to AI learning with our teachers and with our communities? So generally speaking, we always move from declarative knowledge to procedural knowledge to conceptual to epistemic knowledge. So these are kind of the steps towards moving your competency within any area of learning, whether it's AI or a subject. And to make this kind of closer to the listener in this case, and I mentioned a science example because I was a science teacher once upon a time. We talk about the journey to expertise when it comes to photosynthesis in this case. So we start with declarative. Students are learning and memorizing the equation for photosynthesis, being 6 carbon dioxide, 6 waters generating glucose and oxygen. At this stage, the student is just basically learning a rote chemical equation. They don't understand how that is important, where does it fit in, how is this impacting my life? They know nothing. They're just understanding the basic knowledge of what photosynthesis is without really knowing the context of anything. They then move, after they look at this, chemical equation, to procedural knowledge where they're conducting experiments. So at this point, for example, extracting starch from leaves, the teacher provides you with steps. You follow these steps and you find results that the teacher told you to expect. So you're able to follow a procedure that led to an outcome. You still do not understand why is it important for me to know that there's starch in a leaf or not. You're just able to use lab equipment, follow a certain process. So you use the tools, you came up with an outcome, but you still do not understand the importance of that outcome in the grand scheme of things. Once you have some of that knowledge, of foundational knowledge, and that is more front-loading from the teacher's part and the procedural part, we move to the conceptual. And here we're connecting to broader contexts. So we're looking at, okay, we mentioned that here sunlight is required for photosynthesis. I know that there's starch in leaves. What does that mean? Starch stores energy, the sunlight is a source of energy. We move to a broader context. So now, then this has a role in the concept of energy flow in an ecosystem. So they start using their foundational knowledge, using what they've learned through their procedural knowledge to apply to concepts. What's the impact of this on climate change? How does this impact on agriculture? So, as human beings, knowing photosynthesis, knowing these factors that affect photosynthesis, how can I apply this in agriculture? How can I understand its role in climate change? Leading to epistemic knowledge, where at this point, you as a student can come up with certain scientific inquiry. You say, okay, I know that there's water, I know there's light, but as a student, I want to test the impact of UV radiation on plants. And at that point, you have no idea what the outcome is, but you have the foundational knowledge of what photosynthesis is. You know how to design an experiment. You understand that this falls under a broader context of life and some of the things that happen around you. And at this point, you're pushing it forward to try and find innovative practices. How can I improve agricultural practices that humans have through understanding of these processes, procedures, and conceptual factors or conceptual ideologies? It's the same journey that needs to go for AI learning. So at this point, and I think it is important for us to mention, we are expecting our educators to go from not knowing anything about AI to saying, why aren't you using AI tools with your students? Well, themselves, the educators themselves haven't gone through the journey of learning AI. And we're expecting them to demonstrate epistemic knowledge in AI in the classroom with their students and transfer that knowledge to their students without us having, the foundational infrastructure built in to support our teachers in understanding this process, which is where we start to find a disconnect where, okay, we're pushing all these things forward, but we didn't allow our community to go through that journey and learn things that they need to learn. So when I think about how this looks in AI, and this is something that I put together, so don't quote me on that one. This is personal, Um, in my head, when you think about AI, you need to define AI in the context of education. What is artificial intelligence? A lot of our teachers don't know what artificial intelligence is. They don't know or they don't recognize any examples of AI and applications in the classroom. And it's important to start us off by saying, similar to the photosynthesis, what is an AI model? How does it function? What are some of the things behind the AI model that helps it, think critically, put things together, put information together, create analysis. And so that part is as important as applying AI in the classroom. Because we're going to epistemic where we're trying to apply AI and algorithms into the classroom. Then we move to the procedural, and I think that's where it is important for for leadership to create experiences in the use of AI. Not necessarily teachers not necessarily will understand the where it fits into the grand scheme of things, but they can follow a certain procedure, create a certain outcome, and they can start to see how the process works. And I think when it comes to procedural, we're talking about implementation of algorithms, the design of prompts. How do I prompt AI at that point? How do I interact with the AI in a certain procedure to generate a certain outcome? But this is heavily guided by a process. So we're giving the teacher steps 1 to 10. They follow them. We know what the final outcome is. And then they start to appreciate the process leading to the outcome of the use of AI, which then takes us to more conceptual. So then once they see that there is a certain process to generate information from AI, to generate tasks, to generate assignments, how can I then use this in my own subject to personalize learning for our students? And this is something that then becomes more subject specific with the guidance of an AI specialist to help, personalize the AI experience for the educator to design for their subject, but at the same time, ensure that we are We are ethical about the use of AI and the impact on its curriculum. So in this stage, when we get to the conceptual stage with our educators, it will have a lot of moving parts and requires a lot of revisions of curriculum, of teaching practices, of assessments. And that would be, I think, a pressure point in our journey of understanding AI. Eventually, if our educators get to the conceptual portion of AI, we are in a good place, because then if we aim that this would be our mean, all our educators are in the conceptual area of understanding AI, personalizing learning, it's actually great. Then you have your stars who want to use AI even further by developing, novel AI algorithms. And you see these educators in schools right now developing their own chatbots that help their students, answer questions. So the epistemic part of this are your superstars who are going to drive AI use even further by designing their own algorithms. But as organizations, as large organizations, as leaders, we should aim to have our educators in the conceptual realm of AI application. And for that to happen, we have to value the declarative and procedural knowledge that we instill in our educators to get them to the conceptual. And so that's kind of the ideology behind the learning journey of AI. So this is kind of my idea of how we want to push AI learning with our educators in a step manner. But then when you think about all these processes and procedure, I'm going to move us a little bit beyond schools, beyond the concept of application and practical application of AI within schools, into more of the theory. So when we think of organizational culture, and this is Shine's model of org culture, Shine divides organizational culture or labels organizational culture in a three-pillar approach as well, where you have the artifacts, and these are usually the obvious visible signs in your schools of AI in schools. So using AIs for projects, teachers using AI to help plan lessons. And I think at Globeducate, we do this part really well. We have AI projects that are rolled out every year. So we have the artifacts of AI. We can see elements of AI infiltrating into the schools. But at this point, they are heavily guided projects. They are projects that, every school is doing the same thing. We're trying to develop competency of the use of AI within our schools. But then the artifacts alone are not enough to instill change and to root change. We need to move up from that to what we say we value. So espoused values are what we truly say we value as a school. And schools, in my opinion, should help teachers should have the narrative of saying that we are using AI to help teachers do their job better and not replace them. There's this fear of, the AI is going to replace the teacher because of marking, because of planning, because of giving feedback. But eventually, the narrative that we want as leaders, when we talk about our values as a school, is to say, we are using AI to support the teacher, but we still think the final judgment falls onto the teacher. The teacher is the human being, is able to do all these things, to take all that information. AI is merely a tool to help you with your job and to help give you more time to do these critical tasks, to think, to analyze outside of rote tasks that you usually do on a daily basis. And what's more important as well by saying that is that making sure that teachers have access to AI fairness as a school, we're saying that we are going to be fair. We're going to make sure that every student, no matter where they're from, no matter where they come from, every teacher, no matter who they are, has access to these tools to try to develop their skills in and to try to apply within their practice. And then the final step with the espoused values, I would say, is that as school leaders, recognizing the importance of getting training in AI, making sure that our teachers are getting the training they need to become more confident in using AI. Because eventually, I think, Richard, what we need to think about is teachers are facing 20 so students in their class. If they do not feel confident in AI and don't feel confident that they're able to guide their students in the application of AI in their classroom, it is going to be very difficult to convince them to actually bring that up in class. So that's where the training becomes important to develop their confidence in AI so that they are confident enough to then relay that information to their students. And then eventually we have the final step, which is the underlying assumption, which is what we really believe in. The core belief that learning is about people, not machines. And so in the heart of things, education, educators, leaders need to make sure that this is the narrative that's pushed onto their teams, that learning is not about the machine. Learning is about the people, the connections, the social interaction. All of these tools, calculators, AI, whatever technological stage advances that we are getting right now, are all tools to support the core component of the learning process, who are the people, the students, the teachers who are there to deliver that. So there's also a belief that everyone, learns differently, and AI can help personalize learning. So in our core values, in our core underlying assumptions, we need to make sure that we believe that everyone has a different learning style, and that AI is trying to help us personalize that learning process, not just for our students, but also for our teachers and educators. So this is kind of my thought process when it comes to Shine's model, having the artifacts, espoused values, and underlying assumptions in a school context. But then when you think about the actual practical applications of AI, I want to move us to the rollout process. So when we talk about the rollout of AI, we're talking about, and here I reference Bowman and Deal, that has four frames of an organization. You have the structural frame, human resource frame, symbolic frame, and political frame. When we talk about structures, we've extensively discussed structures, I think in the past 30 minutes when we talk about having the right equipment, having the right language established, having the right rules and plan that is clear to our teachers and to our students on how we're going to develop the AI use within our school. Leaders here can use data that they get from their teachers to enhance the structural systems around the implementation of AI within schools. Of course, the structural portion, when we talk about structure, it's the easiest thing to do from a school leadership perspective because it's just the development of the policies, development of the understanding. What actually becomes the core or the more challenging task is supporting people, the human resource frame of the organization. And here we're talking about teacher training and supporting the teachers to use AI confidently. We're talking about multiple variables in this case, teachers that have different learning styles, teachers that are at different levels of competency. How can we as an organization develop everyone at their level or support everyone at their level to develop their AI competencies at school and to develop the tools that they need to use AI? So it's important as well here to reiterate the narrative that the goal here is to free up teachers' time so that they can focus more on helping the students learn and less on some of the low-level tasks that they've been doing. The aim of our teacher, the value of our human resources in our schools is how teachers care for their students, how they monitor the development, and how they support their students' developments. So and then we move on to the next frame, which is the political frame. And here it's more about fairness and resource availability. Here it's about leaders working to make sure all students have access to the technology, not that just some schools or some schools have access and others don't. And making sure that AI is used in a way that fits the school values. Eventually, we need to make sure that we stick to our values. We have our students grounded in our values before they start using AI tools for their tasks and before they start engaging with tools that could, expose them to some information or some experiences that are outside of their own values, which brings me back to the emphasis on the importance of the human being in the classroom, because our values come from our humanity, and that's where the teacher becomes valuable in the classroom to make sure it's there. And then finally, the symbolic. And here we as schools do this really well. We do assemblies, we celebrate success, we showcase how we're using AI. And in this day and age, we have, social media to showcase some of these things. So the symbolic portion of using AI is there. We can push it out on social media. We can push it out on our school website. We can send it to parents. We can show it to teachers. But the value of it as well is to make sure that educators are genuinely celebrating their success when it comes to the application of AI. So these are the frames that kind of help the rollout of AI within schools, or things to think about when we're talking about rolling out AI to schools. So just to move me to sum up what I've been talking about all in all. So I think AI in schools is about teamwork, technology support, but it doesn't so we're talking about teamwork. We're talking about building a community of learners, both students and educators. And it's important to say that technology is there to support our teachers. It doesn't replace our teachers and students. It's there as a tool to learn, as a tool to develop. It's also about fairness and access, learning smarter, and above all, a value-driven leadership. So we need to make sure that we are well rooted in our values, we are well rooted in our beliefs, and that's what drives progress within our schools. This is our compass that moves us forward in this, maze of AI world. And as school leaders, our job is to set clear rules, to support our staff, and to keep our mission at the center of everything that we do. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Imad, thank you so much for that. That I found it fascinating, and I love the clarity that your models bring to thinking. And there were many times when I was listening to you thinking, absolutely. And the thing I think that resonated with me most was your emphasis on the humans in this. And that's not just because of my surname, but I agree completely. It is all about the teachers and helping the teachers and keeping the human element of teaching alive and burning brightly and maintaining that AI is, as you say, just a tool. So thank you so much for that. I found it very uplifting to hear you talk like this and inspiring. I have a question for you. Just about your thoughts, and it may be an unfair question. I was at a conference, an AI in education conference
Mm,
last week, and a speaker called Dr. Andy Hind from the University of Warwick brought this up, and it's something I hadn't thought of or considered. You probably have as a school leader, and I'm thinking about the challenge you have of recruiting new teachers and how that might change in the future. And I'm just going to read to you what he said. He
mm,
said, when talking about the I guess the dangers of AI, he said, I think you've highlighted a risk that we would be alert to, that young teachers become homogenized by the use of AI and don't develop themselves in terms of their own identity, their own passions, their own character as a teacher. And I think that would be a real loss to the profession. So I understood that from he's talking about a cohort of young people coming into the profession who AI has been dropped on, and we're facing the challenge of helping them get up to speed as quickly as possible. But there is going to be that cohort that come into the teaching profession,
mm,
smaller and smaller numbers, admittedly, but they are coming into the profession, and if they are being fed a diet of poor AI hygiene, for better words, then we're all going to suffer with that further down the line. What are your thoughts about what he says?
I mean, this is what I'm going to emphasize on. I think I agree with what he says to a certain extent. What I feel is happening right now is, and I have this from experience, I had a young teacher whom I work with to submit. So I'm helping this teacher, coaching that teacher in development of MYP units. Um, and what happened is that teacher submitted a unit plan that is completely done by AI, right? So you can tell that it's AI language. You could tell that And I confronted the teacher to say, you know, like this is AI generated, the whole purpose of us, and this is not in my school, this is someone I've coached out in another school and I'm working with. I said, you generated this by through AI. I think there is a danger where these new teachers coming into the profession feeling like we have to perfect the process before we even attempt it, part of it, to say, you know, I want to look like I know what I'm doing and this is an easy avenue. And this is where the poor hygiene portion of what you mentioned comes in of you are not you responsibly or ethically using AI in this case. You're just trying to put forward a false image of yourself, a homogeneous image where everyone can look the same in this case. And I think it was very enlightening to have that conversation with that teacher because they said, you know, in the current world of education, not many of us are coming into education, but those who are faced with a lot of competition in the field, are faced with the pressure to perform on day one. Um, it's not like any other profession. The moment you're in education, you're in front of kids, you have to perform. You know, the day one, you're in there, you're in the classroom, you have to perform. And so to an extent, I agree with it, but to an extent, I think the system is actually permitting this to happen by placing this pressure. And it's important for school leaders to be mindful of these new minds coming in and allowing them to attempt and make mistakes and submit poor plans or poor work and get feedback on it and engage in the learning journey that all of us did when we first started with education. And so it might be valuable for us to when we are hiring or when we have new teachers joining the school to start them off on that narrative to say we want like make some of the mistakes that you should make because otherwise there is no point. You're not going to learn. If I'm going to give you a task to generate units and all you do is plug them into AI and generate them, first of all, it will not translate into the classroom teaching at all. So it will become obvious very quickly. And second, you would have learned nothing because didn't have a chance to give you feedback on where you truly are and how you can truly develop as an educator within the school. So completely agree with that idea. I think what I'll bring up as well is what's becoming quite obvious as well is when you're reviewing applicants to schools. The cover letters, the CVs, everything has traces of AI generation into them. So you no longer truly have a picture of who's applying for your position because it's all cookie cutter, same, cover letters that have been generated through AI. I'm not able to see you as an educator, to see you as a person for me to spark interest, which then to me, what I'm doing next is I'll just interview randomly because all of them look the same. All the CVs, all the cover letters are coming to me looking the same. Of course, the experience is different, but the language use and what they're trying to push forward is the same, which places more emphasis on I need to see you, I need to meet you, I need to know you as a person before I move forward with this.
Coming back to the human element again.
Yes, back to the human element.
Absolutely. Imad, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it, and I know this talk will be well received amongst your audience. So thank you for sharing your thinking and your time.
You're most welcome. It was my pleasure. Thank you very much.